Hello and welcome to the Michael Mamas Show. I'm your host, Michael Mamas, and we're coming to you from Mount Soma, home of the Sri Someshwara Temple in the mountains of Western North Carolina. Today we're going to talk about non-attachment. You know, all the different facets of spiritual knowledge, and of course everything in life really, it's all a function of level of consciousness. And so, we've talked about, you can talk about anything, renunciation or any concept you can think of with respect to spirituality. The meaning changes based on your level of consciousness. Your level of consciousness defines the nature of your own experience. We talk about physiology, the body on a very superficial level, really, blood chemistries, things like that. And then we can talk about the physiology of the energy system, and we get into this notion of, psychophysiological centers, the chakras, that sort of thing. So those have physiologies. We have superficial physiology, we have an energetic physiology, but even more deeply, most deeply, we have a physiology of our consciousness. And that determines how we think, how we function, what we experience, how we perceive things, and our understanding of absolutely everything. And we could go through, and we do. I think I did a podcast a while ago about Brahman consciousness. And really, if you want to get a feeling for the depth of the knowledge and how the experience of things is what it's all foundationally structured upon, if I can say it that way, that's all about Brahman consciousness. It's about when the cobwebs of perception are cleared and a person's perceiving things for what they are on the most fundamental, the truest, deepest level. It's called Brahman consciousness. I know one of the principles in Vedic teachings is Pashya, means see, just see. And that's really what it amounts to. We commonly say, oh, yeah, I see. Okay, I see what you're saying. And so we see on a certain level. But the deepest meaning of that word, Pashya, means seen through the eyes of Brahman consciousness. And it's important that, for one thing, just studying that and learning about that points in a direction that deepens our experience. Otherwise, and this is so common, what we do otherwise is we pick up the knowledge on a certain level and decide that we get it and we understand it and we're spiritual beings and we're enlightened and we're, bodhisattvas or whatever. But once we understand, and get a sense of direction, that's one of the real values of meditating, and a meditation that actually works. And what do I mean by that? A meditation where we actually are evolving, where our level of consciousness is becoming refined, where we're starting to function from deeper and deeper levels. And so as we do that kind of meditation and we evolve in that way, it's like now we have 2 points. If we're at one point, it points in any direction, it's one point doesn't determine a line, but 2 points determines a line. So once you've moved even a little bit in the direction of Brahman consciousness, now you get a sense of that direction. 2 points determine a line. And so you start to see, Pashya. I know that he's my teacher, he said that really don't Don't even try talking to them too much until they're meditating, doing a proper meditation, because they won't understand. They don't have 2 points, you know. Now that may be a little overstated, but nevertheless, there's truth to it, you know. Knowledge, as they say, knowledge is structured in consciousness. So now let's talk about non-attachment and what's the meaning of the word non-attachment in this context and with this understanding. On a more superficial level, non-attachment, it can be nothing more than really an attitude or a philosophy or a belief. I remember once I saw this woman, she was a Buddhist, I don't know, monk or whatever, I guess monk. And they asked her about non-attachment. And I mean, I respect her, obviously. I mean, she's dedicated her life to spiritual growth and all. But really, her perspective on non-attachment, just as she spoke, it just seems so clearly a behavioral modification, really, that she's conformed to, a philosophy that she's decided that if she really adheres to that philosophy, then she is non-attached, you know. And then she said one thing. She said, if you pointed a gun at her right now, she wouldn't care because she's unattached. And I mean, that's just not how it works, you know. That's not how real non-attachment works. That's a programming, that's an indoctrination into a really unrealistic and irrational and really inappropriate relationship with life, with your own life, for goodness sake. So what is real? Let's go into kind of like we could even talk about the Brahman consciousness. What's the experience of non-attachment and Brahman consciousness when the physiology is fully integrated? And we have to keep in mind there, that's very important, when the physiology is fully integrated, because you can, and there are people that do this in the name of their spiritual growth, they become dissociated. So they may be awake to the absolute, but it's not integrated with relative existence. Real evolution, real enlightenment, Brahman consciousness isn't a state of disintegration. It's a state of full integration. It just makes sense. So in a state of disintegration, yeah, okay, worms can be boring holes through your legs, like who was that, Ramana Maharshi, when he first got enlightened? And then it took a while to integrate, you see. And so I guess worms would be boring. I think it was Ramana Maharshi, boring holes in his legs, and he wouldn't eat. They'd have to force feed him. And it took him a long time just to get reintegrated back into relativity. And it can be like that. In fact, for most anybody, I think it would be very rare and unlikely, particularly in Kali Yuga, for a person to become enlightened and have it be just completely seamless, go unnoticed. You know, because there's that moment of phase transition. We talk about phase transitions like from water, colder, and turn to ice. That abrupt moment when it crystallizes, that's a big, huge shift. And enlightenment is like that. But once the physiology is integrated, again, we're talking about Brahman consciousness now, then the relativity is perceived to be what it is. And what is it? What is it like? It's like a thin veil. It's like all of relativity, all of this, everything you're looking at, my voice, everything you're hearing, everything you're experiencing, it's just ever so lightly etched on the face of the totality. But it goes on as usual. I remember once I was being interviewed, where was that? In San Diego. And the guy was asking me what it's like. And I said, well, it's completely the same. It's just totally different. And what do I mean by that? He had a hard time with that, But what I mean by that, it's like on the relative level, yeah, you still have passions. You still have convictions. You still have emotions. You still have beliefs. You still have convictions. And they're strong. Our emotions, our love is strong. You could argue even stronger, because when you're rooted in the absolute, then the waves of emotion can be huge. Whereas if you're not rooted in that, you can kind of tumble. I compare it to a kite. When the kite has a good tail, it soars. When the tail is short, it spins and tumbles. So we could say then that the emotions that elevate the kite and have it soar into the air, emotions, thoughts, the whole thing, they're even stronger because the physiology can tolerate it, can deal with it without spinning. But now, at the same time, all that is, and it's hard to convey with words, but at the same time, all of that, the totality of your life is lightly etched on the face of totality, on the face of the absolute, on the face of Chaitanya, on the face of the unified field, on the face of the one thing upon which all of this is lightly etched. It's just like a television screen. You're looking at a television screen and you're not sitting there thinking, oh, television screen. No, you're enthralled in a movie or whatever's on this being displayed on the screen, but it's lightly etched on the face of the screen. It's not really the screen. And we can even get that. See, that's the I get it syndrome. You can get that. Oh, yeah, I get that. Okay, yeah, I get it. And so then, and that's the problem with all this. If you really get into the depth of the spiritual knowledge, it can get so easily spun into a justification of where you're at right now, wherever that may be, whatever your level of consciousness may be. And there's a reason for that. The reason for that is that in the depth of your being, you're already enlightened. That everything is, even a rock. Everything is, in the essence of its being, that one thing out of which all things are born. Is that making sense, Scotty?
Yes, it is.
I'm saying it okay? Because to convey it, it's not so easy, especially because even the knowledge, even what I've said, it's picked up on whatever level of consciousness a person has, and they get it on that level. And so they say they get it. Okay, I get it, and done, Yeah. It's amazing when I watch, and I've said this before, but I'm so fascinated by it when I watch like Sunday morning preachers on television. Or when I drive by and see all the signs in front of the different churches. And they're beautiful. They're well-intended, and you can feel it. They feel it. They know it's got to be true. They know it's true. And it is true on a deepest level, but they're picking it up on a more superficial level. And it almost becomes, kind of like a grade B sci-fi movie or something, because that's not really it, But I can see how they feel it, because it's pointing in that direction. It's giving them a sense of that. And deep inside, we all already know everything. But then the only true knowing is knowing that you know nothing. What do they mean by that? No thing. You know that field upon which all relativity is etched. And it's a field of no thingness, pure isness, pure consciousness, beyond things. It's beautiful, huh, Scotty? Really, the knowledge is really beautiful. And it's so elusive. That's why they forget. It's a field of Maya. This is the field of Maya. But nevertheless, our passions are strong. Our emotions are strong. And in the moment, an enlightened individual experiences the full range of human emotions. They can get upset. They can get angry. They can get sad. They can get depressed, all of that. But I can understand why, you ask Buddha or whatever, there are quotes along these lines, what is enlightenment like? They'll talk about the absolute. Oh, it's a field of total equanimity. See, that's what equanimity is. Equanimity doesn't mean you don't have any emotions anymore. It means your emotions and all of your life is rooted in that place of perfect stability, perfect equanimity. It's like the trunk of a tree is rooted in Mother Earth, infinitely stable, the analogy would go. But nevertheless, the branches move in the wind, all directions, full range. I think that's about what I have to say here, Scotty, unless I left something out.
Well, one thing I had watched, of course, yeah. I was watching earlier this week a little experiment that they had a Christian fellow that was in the middle of about 20 atheists, and one of his points was that most atheists don't understand what they're denying when they don't believe in God. And then he was speaking with one of the atheists that was saying, I feel like I'm more spiritual than most Christians, and I'm, and I was like, whoa, his perspective on that was pretty interesting,
It's beautiful because it's really beautiful because that can be so true, because using a different language, he would be saying that I sense my connection and I live in accord with my connection to God. Only he'd say truth, the absolute, my own moral fiber, or whatever word he'd use. And I live that more fully than a lot of these Christians I see. And he could well be right. And all these atheists, I don't believe there's such a thing as an atheist. I think an atheist is a person that doesn't believe in the perspective upon God that they've been told, that they've been indoctrinated into thinking that's what God's supposed to be. And I just can't believe it. I'm not buying it. And from my background as a child, if that's the definition of atheist, then I'd be an atheist too, because I can't believe that stuff. It just was too superficial of an understanding. And so in a way, atheists are just oftentimes just very sincere and honest spiritualists. That making sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a game. It's just how elusive the whole thing is. But you see, now the interesting thing is that minister or preacher, whatever he was, he has attached his surface understanding of God and what God is with that feeling deep inside, that connection that he does sense. For sure, for real, he senses it, his own divinity, God. He senses that inside. But he equates it with a particular paradigm, a particular rationale of what that deeper value is, even though the rationale is more superficial. It's just, that's why we say echoes of truth. Everything, all these echoes of truth, perceived as truth, hold truth at bay. And really, that's why there's such a contention between different religions. Oh, this is religion and this is truth, and these guys don't know what they're talking about. Oh, no, we have the truth and you don't know what you're talking about. They all don't know what they're talking about. Or you could say the opposite is true. They all know what they're talking about. They're talking about that thing, that one thing that they sense inside the depth of their own being. But they don't know what they're talking about if they just equate it with some superficial paradigm, that is just an echo of that one truth. It's beautiful, huh, Scotty? The whole thing is so elusive.
Yeah.
And it's so beautiful.
Well, it makes sense as to why it's so superficial when it's so hard to explain what it actually is. You know what I mean? They're concentrating on that one aspect of it. It's like almost like, is it just meditation that would allow them to go deeper? Or how would they shift their explanation of their religions to actually get the true prize, or to, you know?
Yeah. You said a beautiful thing. You said a really beautiful thing there, Scotty. I hope I can capture it here again. We function on a daily basis on a paradigm level. We have paradigms and we communicate in terms of paradigms. We function in terms of paradigms. We function on that more superficial level. And that becomes not just our psychological habit, but also our physiological habit, certainly the physiology of the energy system, the chakras. This, the brain, really, our thoughts, our consciousness in that regard, that becomes more enlivened. We can even say, in a sense, well, with respect to the more spiritual aspect of our psychophysiology, our chakra system, the front of the sixth chakra, we would say, becomes overly active. And so that's naturally where we gravitate to. And it's a great level of being. And it's not to be belittled, but at the same time, it ceases to be in balance with that aspect of the physiology that resonates more directly and more fully with the absolute. And that's what we're seeing there, isn't it, Scotty? I mean, that's what you're talking about. That's what we do, you know? And I think a lot of times, even in, it's interesting because in meditation, that's, we close our eyes to meditate, and that's so lively that it just kind of dominates oftentimes our consciousness in meditation. And really proper meditation can be boiled down to, how do you deal with that? How do you work with that? Do you try to push it out? Do you try to, or do you just let it unravel in a natural way? And that's just proper meditation. And again, if you want to learn that, you just go to YouTube, type in Michael Mamas, and the instructions should come right up, How to meditate proper, how to meditate. And what I mean by properly is there are all sorts of different meditations. And that meditation is a meditation that refines the physiology, refines the consciousness, and integrates all the different levels of one's being, you see. Okay. Anything else, Scotty, or we're going to wind her up?
Well, that's it.
Okay, everybody. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk with you again next week.